Welcome to Businessworld's series on sustainability. We have with us today Mrs. Sindhushree Khullar, the former CEO of NITI Aayog. Welcome, Mrs. Khullar. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. For our viewers who have never heard of NITI Aayog, would you like to tell them a little bit about what the organization is about?
NITI Aayog came into being on the 1st of January 2015. So it's a very new institution, and it came about as a replacement for the Planning Commission, which had been there from 1950 to 2014. In 2014, the government decided to replace this institution and took about 4 to 6 months to come up with a new vision, with a new agenda, which suited the times more than the context of the national priorities as they exist today. For the interim between August 15th, 2014, when the Prime Minister announced that he would be doing this, that is, replacing the Planning Commission, a great deal of time was spent in consultations with the public on MyGov platforms, brainstorming with experts, talking to a large number of experts and people in and outside of government on what the shape and form of this new institution should be. And eventually, it was decided to call it NITI, the National Institution for Transforming India.
How is it that you came to be the first CEO of NITI Aayog?
Well, I was the last Secretary of the Planning Commission and also the first CEO of the NITI Aayog. I consider it a great privilege that I was asked to see through the transition from the old institution to the new one with the least disruption, with the least pain, so as it were, for the employees, for the people who were with the organization for a very long time. So, well, you could call me the first Governor General of India who transitioned from partition into independent India.
So this was an extremely challenging task. You are taking a very old institution and setting up from it a completely new organization. What were the kind of challenges you faced in making this transition happen?
Indeed, the challenges were both very daunting, but at the same time very exciting. Because whenever a new institution is set up, there is always a sense of expectation and a sense of wanting to come up to some undelineated, unknown future. And so it was, in many ways, when I look back, it was more in the nature of a day-to-day challenge on how to translate the goals and functions which were set out for the institution into actual people, actual processes, actual structures, which would then be able to carry out the tasks which were set out for them. You had to keep some of the old people, you had to, because they were the continuity. You still had to bring in new people, and for that, it had to be done quickly. The third issue was what about the processes? The Planning Commission had like all government, had very set time cycles. There was a budget cycle, there was an annual plan cycle, then there was implementation, overseeing the implementation, and so on and so forth. Whereas for the new institution, these processes began with calling up the first meeting of the Governing Council. The Governing Council comprises all the chief ministers and the lieutenant governors of the union territories. So for a change, all of them are equal partners. And we called the first meeting on the 8th of February 2015, and they in fact laid out the charter with greater clarity. And as we went along, there was groups of chief ministers who were set up, looked into 3 very major issues of center state importance: Swachh Bharat, Skill India, and the centrally sponsored schemes and the sharing of resources between the states and the center in those schemes. So for each of these, there was intensive interaction, constant meetings at the official level and at the chief ministerial levels. That means that the governing council was very engaged in actually crafting this first few months of this institution. So that was like a large, big plate, big ticket agenda. And on a day-to-day scale, there was this big issue of downsizing the institution, which we were fortunately able to do with the least disruption or the least number of protests. We brought it down from about 12 to 1300 to 500. And all 500 are yet to be filled because as the institution grows, they're going to recruit, they're going to grow, they're going to take more people who are suited to the kind of tasks which this institution will perform.
How long did it take you to go from 1200 to 500?
I was not given much time. Actually, I must say I'm very proud that a lot of my colleagues were part of this endeavor in the government. They were unstinting, gave a lot of time, a lot of energy, effort. The finance secretary, the personnel secretary, the cabinet secretary, they all pitched in to make sure that it all happens. We were given aggressive timelines and deadlines, and we were able to do it, I think, between April to about, we were able to complete the process. And by the time it rolled out, another couple of months. So by the time I left, the institution was ready to take on the new challenges.
How would you define the core charter of NITI Aayog?
The core charter of NITI Aayog is in its functions. The way it is laid out as part of the business rules of government, a large chunk of it revolves around giving a form to Team India, which is cooperative federalism, working with the states, through the states, for various programs which are being rolled out in the states. The second big part of NITI Aayog is the knowledge hub. It is to be a think tank, a policy advice institution to give considered views and thoughts on a large number of policy issues, lay out the reform agenda before the country. And the third part of it is the appraisal, implementation and monitoring, for which there is an arm's length office which has been created called the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, which is part of NITI Aayog, but it's at arm's length from the main NITI. So the CEO really is like the conductor of a large orchestra which works together and plays beautiful music.
Because they seem like two completely independent bodies with different mandates, different charters. And do you see NITI as quite independent and maybe 180 degrees different from the institution that it has emerged from?
On the one hand, you can say that a lot of the functions which Planning Commission was supposed to perform still need to be performed. There still needs to be a coordinating body amongst various ministries. There has to be some kind of balancing between sectoral priorities and an overall national priority. Most of the development programs which are rolled out today, especially the flagship programs, need a huge amount of interministerial, interdepartmental, intersectoral coordination. So to that extent, you need an institution like the Planning Commission was supposed to be to mediate between these competing priorities, sectors, resources. But at the same time, the new NITI is also expected to fulfill a big role as a think tank, as thinking for the country, thinking for the future of the country, and laying out agendas which are yet to be fully fleshed out. In that, the Planning Commission was far more involved in the day-to-day functioning of government, was embedded in government. NITI is not expected to be embedded in a day-to-day functions of government. It is expected to perform the role of a friendly facilitator, be a friend of the states, and yet not be the final arbiter of financial resources, budgets, which the finance ministry is more than capable of handling.
If you had to reflect back on your 1 year at NITI, what would you consider a pinnacle moment?
I would look at my mediating, facilitating role with the subgroups of chief ministers and the sheer excitement of watching their involvement, their energy and their enthusiasm in issues which are of critical importance to the whole country. And I saw them not reflecting their parties, their states or their personal agendas. In these meetings, somehow they were all talking like leaders. And that was really a moment which I would say optimism, their, as I said, enthusiasm and their involvement in these issues. That was in fact something new to me. I had seen many of them individually, we all have. We also work with ministers all our lives. But you see them one-on-one, and it's not the way, the synergies that I saw with these groups. So I would say that these were my moments of great satisfaction and a sense of optimism, if you will.
As a CEO, what are your insights for women generally? How is the experience? What is a message that you can give other women from your experience?
I have always held my own. I have spoken my mind. And very often, even when I'm looking at the way it's being received, it has not mattered to me. What I find gratifying is that it is accepted and respected. So I would say speak your mind, lead from the front. Another big lesson that I have learned, and others will follow. This is something which is not considered to be the leadership style of women, but I think in the government it has stood me in very good stead. And it has helped me stand on my own and to be a voice, sometimes a single female voice in a large group where there are no other women. So my message would be, stand up for yourself, be yourself. But if I have to say something in a lighter vein, most of my colleagues at my farewell from NITI Aayog said that I was a nurturing mother figure. Oh, please.
Well, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for your very insightful comments. And we look forward to hearing more from you and about you.
Thank you.